Hi, this is Mrs. Bustamante. We're going to talk about noise pollution today, particularly describing the human activities that result in noise pollution and its effects, um, and what we kind of need to be aware of. A lot of times we think about noise pollution in more urban areas, right, where we have lots of transportation and construction, domestic, industrial type activity, and then what that can do to certain animals and organisms by sometimes interfering with their ways of communicating too. So, when we talk about noise pollution, we're talking about sounds that are levels high enough to cause some sort of physiological stress or hearing loss. And so, what are some of those sources? Domestic industrial activity, factories, places that use lots of machinery that's pretty loud in an enclosed place, construction, right? Again, lots of machinery, lots of loud noises. Even transportation, like of airplanes or smaller vehicles, even from cars and things that we think of. So, here's what we need to know about some of it, right? This is an interesting chart. Sound is typically measured in decibels. And it gives you what different decibels, different types of devices or technology will give off, right, as you go in. And you'll notice that some things, here's down here a whisper, a quiet office, a normal conversation, your vacuum cleaner. And then you start getting into things like an ambulance siren or a jackhammer or a rifle blast or firecrackers, even. And all the way up here to a rocket launch, right? And it's not only the decibels that you get exposed to that can cause hearing loss, it also has to do with the amount of exposure, the time of exposure that you can have there, right? So you'll notice some things with earplugs, right? You can have exposure to for longer without having, example, as much risk, right? And can really like cut even your risk in half by using some protection of your ears. Here's some other scales, right? The amount of time you can be exposed to a certain decibel, right? And you'll notice the higher you get, right, the less time you want to be exposed to that versus things that are pretty quiet. Again, this is kind of an interesting chart, right? This is kind of where we start to see hearing loss occur, right? And the decibels that there are, so it just gives you another graph to look at. Here's your disco, subway, symphony, orchestra, power drills, other materials. That's why we often suggest that you wear some sort of ear protection, right, when you're working with loud materials and equipment. So the loudest sound recorded in history was the sound made by Krakatoa volcanic eruption, they believe, in 1883. It was so loud that it ruptured the eardrums of people 40 miles away, and it traveled around the world 4 times, and it was clearly heard 3,000 miles away. So this is in Indonesia, why we can't see it now, right? And it was in 1883, a long time ago. We don't have video of it. We can look at some other volcanoes if you go to the site and read about it a little bit, and it'll give you some examples of how loud it really was. And it seems pretty crazy that that could actually happen and occur. So, what are some of the harmful effects based on noise exposure, right? Cognitive, so particularly on children, right? Difficulty in speech development, impaired language comprehension, poor memory, and reading loss. Physical, they might have hearing loss. Could cause raised blood pressure, probably because it induces stress, right? Endocrine imbalance, which controls your hormone production, right? Behavioral stress, anxiety, lack of motivation, maybe even some hyperactivity or hypernervousness, right? Just this idea that there's something always loud around you can have some negative effects on your development. It can also affect other organisms, right? Why is that? Why is noise pollution a thing? Well, it can induce stress, right? And the mask of sounds that they normally would use to communicate with one another or hunt or even find a mate, right, will play an influence. It can damage their hearing as well. And because a lot of animals use sound to communicate and display migratory patterns and routes, it can also interfere with that. But marine mammals typically seem to be affected because they use sonar or sounds to carry further through the water. And so when we think of boats and other, especially large boats, right, on the water, that can really affect them. So here is, and how does it affect them? Well, oftentimes it will interfere with the sounds that they're trying to send to one another, so they cannot communicate. Here's a short clip of a boat interfering with some sound of the dolphins. Pull back here. Here are the dolphins. And you notice it's much harder to hear them now with that boat moving through.